Welcome to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Choral Conductors. What are some attributes that you have of effective choral conductors? Well, we're not only vocal technicians, we also have to be superb musicians, communicators. We also need to inspire. So what are the 7 habits? Well, 7 habits were developed by Stephen Covey, the 7 habits of highly effective people. Why should we apply these to choral conducting? Well, the 7 habits are a positive leadership model in the business world. They're principle-centered, and we are in a people business, so it makes sense that we at least investigate these and see how we can apply these. Because music involves bilateral brain function, the organizational properties that are part of the 7 habits coexist along with the artistic creative properties. So in music, we use both hemispheres to process, to be effective, and the 7 habits appeals to all of us in both of those realms. So what is a habit? According to Stephen Covey, a habit is where your knowledge, your desire, and your skills intersect. And as habits, then they become internalized principles and patterns of behavior. So the knowledge, what to do, why to do it, the desire, wanting to do it, and the skills, how to do it. I think we've all known people, or maybe ourselves even, have had the knowledge to do something and the skills to do it, but not the desire. So it doesn't become a habit. Or maybe we've had the desire and the knowledge, but we haven't had the skills. And so it takes all 3 in order for us to develop effective habits. The 7 habits are an inside-out process. And this quote by Leonard Bernstein actually talks a lot about the inside-out process. Before the baton can be free, the heart must be free. So we must be free internally before we can be effective externally. So conducting is an inside-out process, as is developing habits. Stephen Covey's 7 habits are: be proactive, begin with the end in mind, put first things first, think win-win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, synergize, and sharpen the saw. The way the 7 habits are set up is that the habits 1, 2, and 3, if you look at the bottom, are internal. They're working on ourselves. They're what he calls our private victories. And then habits 4, 5, and 6 are our public victories in dealing with other people. And as we move up into the steps or the habits, we move from dependence to independence and then interdependence. And this is all wrapped with habit number 7, which is sharpening the saw. So let's get into the habits just a little bit. This is habit 1, be proactive. According to Covey, we have a circle of influence or a sphere of influence where we can actually make a difference, and a circle of concern where we're unable to make a difference, but we care about what's going on. As we become proactive, our circle or sphere of influence is actually expanded, and it is able to address the circle of concern. So positive energy enlarges our circle or sphere of influence. Negative energy reduces our sphere of influence or our circle of influence. And so we actually become less influential as negative energy enters into the picture. At the heart of our circle of influence is our ability to make and keep commitments and promises. That's probably the quickest way that we erode our circle of influence, is if we're unable to make commitments or keep the commitments we have made. And as we are able to keep those, our sphere is enlarged and we have more influence. In the business world, the top 10 attributes of an effective leader are as follows. And I found this list fascinating. If you're an expert in your field, that's number 10. If you're a motivator, number 9. Model, so you're living it, number 8. Dedication, number 7. Decision maker, number 6. Caring, number 5. Halfway through the list that we care. Being a visionary, number 4. People focused, number 3. Being a communicator, number 2. And number 1, the most important attribute of effective leadership, integrity. So interesting that came in as number 1. Our integrity in keeping commitments and the ability to make these commitments, according to Covey, are the clearest manifestations of proactivity. The most effective way we can be proactive is to be able to keep our commitments. It seems to come down to integrity. And what happens if we make a mistake? The proactive approach to a mistake is to acknowledge it instantly, correct it, and learn from it. So what are some ways we as choral directors can fail to demonstrate integrity? Well, the types of integrity to be maintained as conductors are musical integrity, vocal integrity, programming integrity, management integrity, moral integrity, and the integrity to reflect the composer's intent. So these are all integrity issues that we deal with as conductors. How can we be proactive in these areas? And what is proactive? Well, I think the easiest definition to understanding proactivity is not to be reactive. In other words, thinking through these things in a positive, proactive way before we encounter them. So how do we apply proactivity to our field? Anticipating potential situations, anticipating potential rehearsal challenges in each piece, and having a plan for each piece. Comprehensive musicianship through performance. So not just selecting our repertoire without thinking about what we want to teach. Our second habit, habit 2, begin with the end in mind. This is all about conductor preparation. All of the technical things that we do before we even present the music to our choir. Here's an example of a rehearsal arc that helps us to find habit number 2. Rehearsing in the whole, part, and then whole again sequence. So whole being macro, and then working things out micro, and then getting the music back to whole. So thinking the big picture. Again, our rehearsal arch ends up starting with whole, somewhere in the middle, and probably pretty quickly toward beginning middle, working on the micro aspects of our music, and then getting it back to whole or macro prior to the performance. This is an issue that we have to address as conductors constantly. Process versus product. And we could have an interesting conversation on this if we are more of a process or a product-driven conductor. In other words, where does the real action happen? Does it happen in the rehearsal or does it happen at the concert? Or maybe it's a balance of both. And depending on our group, that could change. Thinking ahead, what are our basic goals? What are our loftier goals? What do we really want to accomplish in what we do? Rather than going in daily and just doing our job without thinking about what our goals are. And the even bigger picture, what should our students get this semester? Not just this concert session, this semester, this year. In the 4 years that I have them, what should my students get? So some things to reflect on there would be, what types of repertoire should they get in the 4 years I have them? What types of musical growth experience? What types of musicianship experiences should they have? Should I be preparing them for a career in music? Should I be preparing them to be a lifelong learner of music? Should I be preparing them to be a lifelong advocate of music? And the even bigger picture, will I be remembered as a technician or will I be remembered as an artist? Successful choral artists will begin with the end in mind. And we could have an interesting conversation about what is the difference between a technician and an artist. So beginning with the end in mind, the definition, have a total concept before embarking. Sometimes we start on the path before we have the total concept. Finding a way to use the whole part whole strategy or the macro, micro, macro, and not getting stuck in just the micro in the middle where we are working on parts, notes, rhythms, etc., but getting the piece back to being whole again. And the application of beginning with the end in mind, have a 4-year plan, have a yearly plan, have a semester plan, and have a rehearsal strategy to address each of these plans. Habit 3 is putting first things first. The definition of first things first is having organization and having structure. So once we have begun with the end in mind, we now need to figure out how to implement that. So putting first things first. How do we apply it? Well, more detail into our rehearsal arc. What are we going to do during our macro, micro, macro rehearsal period? What are we going to then do each rehearsal? What are we going to do each piece on each rehearsal? So the teaching plan for each piece, the daily rehearsal plan, the warm-ups that have a purpose that apply to the rehearsal plan that relates to the warm-ups, and finding ways to connect between the warm-ups and the repertoire. And then putting first things first is building that repertoire over the semester. And this concludes part 1. We will move into part 2 very soon.